In October 1973, when the Yom Kippur War broke out, the writer Chaim Sabato was a young gunner deployed to the Golan Heights. In his memoir about the war, he describes the terrifying first hours when Syrian tanks broke through the lines. The air was thick with smoke, artillery was pounding the earth, and enemy armor was closing in fast. Sabato sat inside his tank, staring down the sight of his cannon, trying desperately to line up his shot. But in the middle of the panic, his commander yelled at him to stop fiddling with the optics and just fire. There was no time to calculate elevation or range the target, no time, as the military phrase goes, to adjust the sights. And that's how 22-year-old Chaim Sabato went into one of the fiercest battles of the Yom Kippur War, surrounded by fire and noise, with sights that had never been properly adjusted. Welcome back to Torah in 7. I'm Bela Olidord, and near the end of this week's Parsha, Ki Tavo, Moshe says something that seems to contradict itself within the space of just a few verses. The Jewish people have already reached the end of their 40 years in the desert, and Moshe reminds them of everything they experienced when they left Egypt. Atem ri'item et kol asher asa Hashem le'enechem be'eretz Mitzrayim. You have seen everything that God did before your eyes in Egypt. And then he emphasizes the point again, Hamasot hagdolot asher ra'u einecha, the great trials that your own eyes saw. They had seen the 10 plagues, walked through the sea on dry land, stood at Sinai, and eaten manna from heaven. But then, 2 verses later, Moshe contradicts himself. V'lo natan Hashem lachem lev ladat ve'einayim lir'ot ve'oznayim lishmo ad hayom hazeh. God did not give you a heart to know, eyes to see, and ears to hear until this day. So what does that mean? Moshe just told them that they saw everything with their own eyes. Now he tells them that until this very day, they didn't have eyes to see. Apparently, seeing an event unfold before your eyes is no guarantee that you understand what you're seeing. And it's tempting to think, surely if I had seen what they saw, I would have understood. If God split the sea in front of me, how could I possibly miss what it meant? But here's a generation that actually saw the sea split. And Moshe tells them, you saw and still you didn't have eyes to see until this day. What happened on this day? Rashi tells us that Moshe gave a Torah scroll to the tribe of Levi, and the other tribes protested. What about us? We too stood at Sinai. The Torah belongs to us too. So something had changed. For 40 years, God had been reaching toward them, taking them out of Egypt, feeding them in the desert, protecting them along the way, and now, finally, they were reaching back. They weren't simply receiving the Torah, they were claiming it. It belongs to us too, they were saying. Now they finally could look back at everything they had experienced and see it differently, as part of a relationship. When you're standing at the Red Sea with Paro's army behind you, the splitting of the sea means rescue. When you're hungry in the desert, manna means food. When you're thirsty, water from a rock means survival. And none of that is wrong. But that's what they could see from where they were standing. Only later could they look back and understand that the Exodus wasn't merely an escape from Egypt, the manna wasn't merely food, and Sinai wasn't simply a spectacular revelation. They were all part of the same story, the story of a relationship that God had been building with them all along. So the events hadn't changed, their vantage point had. We tend to assume that if we were present for something, we know what happened. I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. But our eyes don't interpret what they see. We do. Perhaps that's why Moshe speaks not only of einayim lir'ot, eyes to see, but of lev lada'at, a heart to understand. We see through the person that we are at that moment, through our expectations, our fears, our needs, and the limits of what we're capable at that time of understanding. Years later, we may discover that the thing we thought was the crisis wasn't the crisis at all, or that the decision we agonized over mattered less than something else happening at the same time that we barely noticed. Time has a way of rearranging the significance of things. The facts don't change. We change. And that may be why Moshe doesn't say that God finally showed the Jewish people something they hadn't seen before. He says God gave them einayim lirot, eyes with which to see. Chaim Sabato survived the Yom Kippur War. Nearly 3 decades later, he wrote about what he had experienced and called the book Ti'um Kavanot, Adjusting Sights. On one level, the title refers to the sights of the tank, the sights Sabato hadn't been given time to adjust before going into battle. But the Hebrew word kavanah also means intention, direction, the orientation toward which something is aimed. And the older Sabato, looking back at the war he'd experienced as a young man, was in a sense doing what he had been unable to do in the tank that first day. He was adjusting his sights. He had seen the war at 22. He remembered what happened, but it took years of living and becoming someone different to understand more fully what he had seen. And I wonder how much of our own lives are like that. We are so sure we know what is happening to us while it's happening. Something happens and almost immediately we give it a meaning. This was a failure. Those years were wasted. I made the wrong choice. I missed my chance. And we carry those interpretations with us as though they belong permanently to the events themselves. But the facts of the past may be fixed without their meaning being fixed. A choice we regretted may have led somewhere we couldn't possibly have seen from where we were standing. The past hadn't changed, but we have acquired new eyes with which to see it. And I think about this especially now as we, the Jewish people, are living through a time that feels dark and deeply foreboding. We see things we thought we would never see again, and it can be hard not to draw conclusions from what is unfolding before our eyes. But we are still inside this moment. We don't yet know what these years will produce, what they will awaken, or where they'll ultimately lead. We are living the events before we know their meaning. We, too, are still adjusting our sights. That's it for Torah in 7 on Parshat Ki Tavo. If you'd like to go further, please go to torahin7.substack.com. If you'd like to dedicate an episode in honor of someone you love, please go to our dedication page on torahin7.substack.com. Thank you for listening. Shabbat Shalom.